Welcome to this week's expert interview, and I'm thrilled to have with me today an accounting legend. It's Joe Woodward. Joe, good day to you.
It's always great to be here, Rob.
Are you a legend? Are you admitting to that? You've been in this game a long time, Joe.
Well, we have a saying here in the U.S. that somebody can be a legend in their own mind.
Yes.
Maybe I'm a legend there. I don't know, yes. But I do definitely I've established a bit of a reach here, and there are some folks that listen to me about how to run their practices. So I'm honored by that.
There is indeed. There's a comedian over here that says, "I'm really disappointed with the way legend has been devalued from pulling a sword out of a stone to unexpectedly bringing back potato chips."
Yes, exactly.
So legend
that's brilliant.
Legend is probably a bit overused, but yes, you have been in the game a long time. For people that haven't come across you, Joe, just give us a 60-second bio on a flavor of how you got to here.
Yeah, so I am a coach and trainer to accounting firms, largely known here in the United States, and I coach firms of all sizes, but I specialize in the CAS department or the bookkeeping department of the firms, or some practices are just bookkeeping practices. But we do coach into the whole of how the firms operate, even though we specialize in the CAS department.
Got it. And what kind of shape do you feel the accounting profession or industry is in right now? We've been through.
Yeah, okay. And of course, that's globally, that could be answered different ways. So I'm going to kind of speak from the position of the United States, and then you can tell me, Rob, how that's being echoed in the UK. But in the United States right now, the state of the profession is strong in the sense that we are embracing technology. We are, through COVID, our adoption of the cloud has been accelerated, but we are being disrupted, and the disruptions that we are facing are severe. And they're coming from multiple fronts. One of the biggest waves of disruption right now is our staffing crisis. You can tell me if you're experiencing something similar. This was accelerated by COVID, but not created by COVID. In the United States, we have a population bubble called the boomers, and the boomers have moved their way through the generations. And every single time they hit a generation, they change things. They change everything from the economics to the culture. Well, this is happening now as the boomers are retiring. So we have a massive retire off facing the profession, coupled with the fact that the college students who are graduating are largely not choosing accountancy. They see it as boring and irrelevant and drudgery work. And so we have a brand problem, because true accountancy is not, it has those elements. It can be very routine, and it does have a historical, component. But the more that we can become interpretive and analytical, the more we can become transformative. And I think we'll start to get that younger generation back. So we have a massive staffing crisis, coupled with scaled competitors that are global, right? KPMG is getting into the small bookkeeping space. QuickBooks is a bookkeeping company now. We've got H&R Block, a major tax gig economy worker here in the United States that scaled tax preparation and has been competing against tax preparers here for years. It's now embraced bookkeeping with 7,000 bookkeepers. They're deploying in brick and mortar locations. And then most recently, a Bezos-funded organization, Pilot, which I'm sure you're familiar, is going to try to scale and change the face of bookkeeping. So when you get those kinds of things, you get massive commoditization. And then a third leg of it is the technology piece, where we are leveraging those technologies now. That's great. If hopefully everybody listening to this podcast is leveraging those technologies. Excuse me, but just ask the travel agencies how this wave works. You embrace the technologies until finally the technologies become commercialized and they become commodities, and then utilities, and then all of a sudden everybody's just using them from their desk. So at what point the technologies we're leveraging now will become those that are used to fully automate record keeping processes and tax processes with just a little push over the edge? Don't know. As artificial intelligence increases, the risk becomes more and more severe. So you have technology, you have staffing, and you have scaled competitors that are all converging on the rank and file bookkeeping firms right now.
It's so insightful.
And tax practices.
Well, yes, it's so insightful. There's so much going on. Accountants generally don't cope well with change. The profession's been ever thus. Double entry bookkeeping has been ever thus for many, many years. So what do you see? And by the way, that's happening in the UK and other parts of the world as well when we talk to people. So no surprises there. What do you see as the accountants, the bookkeepers' attitude to change and disruption, Joe? How are they coping as a breed?
Okay, so surprisingly, that's beginning to shift, or not surprisingly. Surprisingly, it took so long for it to shift. But no, accountants don't like change. But increasingly, I'm seeing that accountants are identifying the same problems. Just like you said, there's no surprise there. If I went to an accounting show and said, these are your 3 major disruptive impacts, it would be, I'd get nods. They all know.
Yeah.
And nothing focuses the mind quite as much as a threat from behind. So if they can just now have a pathway, I think the motivation is there. I think the desire is there. I think the embrace of the change is there. And I think it's all about coaching and guiding at this point.
So if I were to ask you what separates the good accounting firms from the great, you would likely say their ability to deal with disruption and build a thriving practice amidst all these drivers. Would it be something like
yes. Disruption proofing your practice, right. Absolutely. But underneath the umbrella of disruption proofing is sort of the question, how, right? And so a thriving practice, what separates the practice that's disruption proof from the one that's not, is a full embrace of the cloud in the way you operate as a practice. There's a prevailing mythology out there, Rob, I'm sure you've seen it too, that my firm adopts Xero, or my firm adopts QuickBooks Online, and therefore my firm is cloud.
Yeah.
And no, because cloud is about the holistic way that your firm operates, everything from the way it manages documents, to the way it collaborates with clients, to the way it manages its systems and hardware. In other words, all the way down to the point where even the computer sitting under or on someone's desk is a cloud managed computer from an outside or inside IT consultant. So that the standard is, if you can take a professional in your practice and you can place them anywhere in the world, and they will be just as effective as if they were sitting at their primary desk location, then I would say you've probably met the cloud standard. When I mean just as effective, I don't mean because they prepared in advance to take just what they needed on a flash drive or just what they needed in a suitcase because it's paper or it's imprisoned into a local drive. I'm saying that without doing anything other than grabbing that laptop and going, they are just as effective on the road as they are at their desk. When that standard is met, then you are prepared in the cloud component to be disruption proof. But there's another one. That's just the work environment that's modernized.
Right.
Now you have to be automated. We're finding that firms that are disruption proof can automate up to 80% of the manual processes of tax and bookkeeping. And when you do that, now you can start competing, not by driving your price down, but by insulating your gross profit margins in an increasingly price sensitive world. But then you couple that with a price commoditization neutralizer, that's effectiveness. If you will take what you've automated, you will take the increased gross profit margins you're getting from that to stabilize your profit, invest that profit back into developing advisory. Now you can drive prices up from where you are. You can go run counter to commoditization while your bread and butter staple bookkeeping and tax are operating at a higher profit margin than your competitors.
We'll get you back on another episode to talk about data and the cloud, Joe. I know you're very passionate about that and have a lot of
very passionate about that
content about that. But for now, what have some accounting firms, bookkeepers got wrong over the last couple of years?
I believe we got wrong the fact that if you just embrace a cloud GL, I'm cloud. So that's number one. But number two, I believe that we have missed the mark on this word advisory.
Okay.
And we've missed it from several different angles, all the way down to its core definition. If you ask feet on the street, what is advisory? Depending on who you're asking, you're going to get several different definitions, even more flavors of definitions.
And if you ask 10 CPAs, you'll get 12 different answers as well, Joe.
Well, yeah, exactly. I like that. 10 CPAs, 12 answers.
Yeah.
Because it's nebulous. So we have a joke here that advisory, we call it the A word, because it's not that it's a bad direction for practices to go. It's a bad word because we've not taken care of the word. We haven't nurtured the word. We haven't clearly defined the word. And even worse, Rob, and this is the indictment on thought leadership and the coaches and the trainers out there, of which I'm a part. We've told all these accounting firms for the last decade or more what they need to do and why they need to do it and when they need to do it, which is yesterday. But very few of us are telling these accounting firms how to do it, right? So we're part of the problem. Now, by the way, I actually built a school of advisory because I got tired of being disingenuous there. So I've got a 300-hour school of advisory. But we don't even call it advisory because it's such a loaded word. We call it a school of business coaching. Because as soon as we put the A word on it, then it means 12 different things, like you said, to 10 different people.
Well, even trusted advisor, Joe, you go to that phrase. Accountants don't know exactly what that is and what they have to do to be a trusted advisor, but everyone's telling them to step up and own that space.
Exactly. But see, that's even a worse term because I don't like it even less, because when you throw the word trusted in front of it, I tell you, every accountant hears differently than what you mean.
Okay.
What they hear is trustworthy accountant. And because I am a trusted or trustworthy accountant, therefore I advise my clients, I am a trusted advisor. Well, that just means that I'm not going to share their information around, or that I'm going to be diligent and competent in the advice that I provide.
I'm ethical, I'm compliant.
I'm going to check the box. I'm going to go to that conference. I'm going to go, Rob tells me I should be a trusted advisor. I'm trusted. I'm an advisor. Check. Right. And so what I just got back from the BDO Alliance in Las Vegas, and those are some of the most cutting edge firms in the sort of regional firm space. These are not small operations. They have 30, sometimes even over 100 professionals in these firms, but they're not T100 firms for the most part, top 100 size firms. So they sit in this spot where they have a tremendous amount of resources. They have the same challenges as the top 100, but they're slightly more nimble, and they're still, to a large degree, founder-led, many of them. So I'm speaking with the leadership, that's who comes to the BDO Alliance, about these very problems. And what some of these firms are doing, Rob, with advisory is inspirational. They're and transformational, which I think is really the key. If you say that you're a trusted advisor, and the impact of your advisory services is not, to some degree, transformative, if it doesn't result in positive change for the client, then I would argue you're telling the client the wrong advice, or you have the wrong client. Those are really only options, right? And these firms are having a transformative impact. It's encouraging.
Transformative is such a great word, but it scares a lot of accountants who are dealing with risk and trying to be conservative and keep an eye on the numbers. But I get that there's ways accountants and bookkeepers have fallen short, but in other ways, they're stepping up. Is there an area of accounting you think hasn't evolved as quickly as it should have done, hasn't jumped on the wagon, they haven't got it yet? Or would that be advisory again?
That's the answer to this question. This is the one area, but I would also say that firms, coupling with that, one of the reasons that firms who have tried to embrace advisory, but maybe haven't had that transformative impact, is because they're not specializing like they need to specialize. And with bookkeeping and with tax and with attestation, we've gotten used to being able to take on any industry that comes our way, because we're always dealing with the commonalities of business with a few nuances in reporting, and we can adapt to that. But when you start getting into business coaching, you have to understand how that business operates better than the person who owns that business, which I don't know how it is in the UK, but in my country, that's not a very big leap. the business owners do not get into business because they're masters at how to run a business. They get into business because they're really masters at their trade.
Yes.
You know, take a dentist. A dentist doesn't know how to run a dental company. They just know how to work on teeth. So it's the E-Myth stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so since we have the E-Myth thing, you can leap over the skill set on how a dentist needs to run their business, or a veterinarian, or an acupuncturist, or a construction company very quickly. And then you can start to guide and protect their journey. But it's only when you've narrowed the pool of companies that you serve. Now, if you're a much larger firm, you can have specialists in your firm, multiple people, where each person specializes on an industry. That's great. In the smaller firms, you don't have that luxury. You're going to have to pick an industry, and you're going to have to learn it. You're going to have to be able to master its operations, and then create a formula that you can take from client to client to client, which will also further your brand. That's the other thing I would say is we've failed at establishing brand as an industry, individual brands, as well as the brand of the overall profession. All has to be nurtured better than what we're doing.
I'm sensing an impasse actually too, Joe, are we asking entrepreneurial business owners in coaching them and offering them business coaching services to think more like accountants and understand the numbers and get behind the data? Or are we asking accountants to be more like entrepreneurs and business owners in their thinking so they can better advise and understand the mind of the business owner?
It's got to be the latter, Rob.
Okay.
Because I don't think typically you're not going to get the typical business owner to think like an accountant.
Right.
We've got to bring the accountancy. We've got to translate the principles of accountancy to them, right? Which is, I think, where you were going with your question, right? You knew the answer. And that's why it's critical that we play that role. I believe most small business owners are operating from a severe visibility crisis. I would say some of them are even driving blind. And I think this doesn't take your listeners by surprise. They know their cash position by their bank balance. They know their net income 12 times a year, 2 weeks after the fact, because it's the only thing they look at in the financial reports that we send them. And they don't understand or look at any of the other. And here's this is another big mistake we make with advisory. We look at the entire chessboard, and we're able to see 12 months ahead because we're masters at chess here being accountancy. But then we make the mistake of thinking, well, let's turn these folks into accomplished chess players. No, they're playing their own game, trying to get a house built, trying to get a car fixed. That's their chess.
Yeah.
We need to play the game of chess on their behalf, but we need to take about 10 data points, 5 to 10, sit down with them once a month. And it's not even the same 10 necessarily. It depends on what's going on in that month, but we cherry pick the 5 to 10. We sit down with them once a month, and we tell them not what the numbers mean, unless that's a means to an end, but what's the implication of the numbers for what they should do? Actionable management advice. Because this change from here to here, you need to do this. 5, maybe at most 10. And it will radically impact the way that they're driving their business. And it will create much needed visibility. And can I come all the way back around to the disruption pieces? That's the very thing that the software is not giving them. Therefore, it insulates you from technology disruption. It is what the scaled competitors are not doing. Therefore, it insulates you from the scaled competitor disruption. And when it comes to the staffing, that kind of knowledge work allows you to generate revenue disproportionately to effort, neutralizing some of that impact as well.
Got it.
We can kill all the birds with a single stone if we will just sit down with the client and do the 5 to 10 key metrics.
Got it. And I like that, not overwhelming them. There's so much data now going on in the accounting firm, the businesses they serve. Joe, I want to ask you, you've got a foot squarely in the bookkeeper space, and you're very qualified to answer the question. Are we seeing a blurring of the lines between bookkeepers and accountants and CPAs? I even heard of a story recently where a business had hired a zero certified practitioner that wasn't qualified in accounting at all. They had no professional qualifications, but they had certification in the software. So bookkeepers, accountants, tell us a little bit about those lines.
Well, they're blurring within the CPA firms here as well.
Right.
Part of that's driven by the staffing crisis. People are hiring whoever they can get their hands on,
Yeah.
right? But that's a good outcome, because the professional designations are important. People who have earned their certified public accountant, as we call it in the US, or the chartered accountant.
They've sweated blood for those, haven't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and also the enrolled agents. That's a designation that's unique to the United States, but it's a designation granted by our Internal Revenue Service for tax preparation and representation. These are hard-fought designations in the profession, and we should honor them. However, there are people who know how to do the work without the credentials, and they can do that under the guidance, the leadership of the people in the firm that have the credentials. I don't see why those people aren't just as qualified for the roles. Maybe not in obviously they can't sign returns, or maybe they can't sign the attestation reports, but they can definitely do the work as proficiently as those who have those kinds of designations. So, in the legal industry, there's this whole para community, right? In the medical industry, there's this whole nursing community. Comparisons break down a little bit there because the nurses have to be licensed and credentialed. But my point is, if we operate a little more like a hospital, where we have various degrees of nurses before you get to doctors, then various degrees of doctors, we'll be a lot more capable and holistic in the way that we service our patients. And I'm using my air quotes here. Where we've thought of it in a very linear way, that the doctor does all the work of the nurses and all the work of the surgeons and everything in between. And I don't mean to say in any way to disparage the bookkeepers or the non-credentialed tax preparers. I'm not talking about a caste system. I'm talking about a degree of skill set system, because and a degree of licensing. There's in the nurse practitioner space, those nurses that have a similar authority to the doctor. I have found that I would rather be serviced in almost every case, other than surgery, by a nurse practitioner than by a doctor. These are extremely brilliant people. They just have never gotten the MD after their name.
They've also got a better bedside manner. They can often communicate a lot better, can't they?
They can often, yeah, and also their writing skills are a little better too.
Yes.
Excuse me. But the point is, we need to be looking at the profession more like a hospital than like an MD doing all the work.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And we did an interview with Louise Wilson of Moneypenny, who were at the BDO Alliance. You may have met them there. And they do frontline first experience calls and live chat for accounting firms. And she said, we don't need qualified accountants to take inbound calls. We need somebody with a good bedside manner, a lot of empathy, to get to the heart of the problem and triage that, if you like a nurse would do, and then direct them to the right person. So who needs a qualified CPA for that?
Right, exactly. And that's when the doctor is needed. You call the stat, right? Yeah. So that if we can do this, Rob, it means that the CPAs, it's sort of the totem pole or the caste system that's been prevalent within the professions, that gets torn down. And maybe some nurses would tell you that the doctor's there's still a caste system in hospitals, and that's where the metaphor breaks down. But the really good hospitals, I would suspect, are the ones where the MDs fully respect the skill sets of the nurses, and they work in concert, they work in synergy, right? And if we could do the same thing with the accounting firms, then this blend of the credentialed and non-credentialed creates a powerhouse of skills.
So let's bring this plane home, to quote a phrase, Joe. We started talking about the disruption-proof practice, and you gave us 3 great metrics, if you like, for what are the driving forces: brand and the boomer black hole, and the unattractive profession for the young ones coming in. You mentioned scaled players, really important, and then the tech that's going on there. So let's just wrap that up and turn that into practical advice for the accountants, the CPAs, and the leaders listening. What do they need to do to build a disruption-free practice?
Yeah, and so first we talked about the advisory layer and the modernization layer, but at the end of the day, it's got to be effective. It's got to be the entire measurement of success has to go from how accurately did I record the past to how effectively I am interpreting the present with an implication for the future. And if we can do that, we will change not just the impact we have on our clients, we will change the brand of accountancy for the next generation coming in and for the whole of our business and personal clients. More analysis, more interpretation. But I've got one more for you, Rob, and that is culture. The perception of accountancy, maybe even the reality, is that we are, stodgy, stiff-collared, emotionless, just anything that would say, as a matter of fact, we're the brunt of all the jokes for that very reason. And it's not just that I'm not just saying that we have to, put the foosball tables or the ping pong tables. That's a little bit arbitrary. What I'm saying is build a culture that transcends the genre. And that's done, yes, with a little fun. Yes, you want to have the company retreat. Yes, you want to add a little jocularity to your life. You want to hire people that add a little energy to the firm and can represent the firm with that kind of energy. But it's deeper than that. I would encourage your listeners to read a book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, because in that book, he details out how to establish culture through a declaration of company values, not from a PR or thin or surface application, but internally, how to use those values to nurture the kind of human-to-human interactions within the company, human-to-human interactions between your company and your clients. It's game-changing.
So ultimately, you're saying you get the culture right, you get the advisory piece right, you'll start attracting more people into the profession, you'll maybe hold on to people a little longer, you'll create competitive advantage against scale players, you'll by necessity digitally transform because you've got to be in the cloud to deliver effective advisory. That's it, isn't it, Joe, in a nutshell?
That's it in a nutshell.
It's so simple. Why isn't everyone doing it?
Well, it's simple, but it's difficult. Yeah. So, and I'm so glad you mentioned that word simple. It's simple to climb Mount Everest. Doesn't make it easy, right?
Yes.
You just keep going up.
Yeah.
But yes, it's an extremely difficult climb. And I'll tell you, that thought leadership and the people that have the coaching and education companies like I have got to do more to create practical pathways to not just tell people how, but to coach them through the process of change. Yeah. And if we'll start doing more of that, Rob, then the firms will follow.
Well, I'm going to ask you just finally in a moment, Joe, to share with us what you feel are the 2 or 3 top skills and attributes that accountants, bookkeepers are going to need to succeed in the coming years. But before I do that, there's some great stuff you do for bookkeepers and accountants. We'll put your contact details in the show notes, but what kind of things do you help them with?
Well, we do have that 300-hour business coaching school, and it covers 6 different disciplines of coaching. You don't have to do all 6. If you just do one, you can get through it in about 6 months, 3 to 6 months. But if you want to do all the disciplines, it's a 3-year run. You start coaching as you're going. It's not like 3 years, then you start. Okay. We also have a practice advancement program that is similar in scope and nature. Over a period of 3 years, you go through this and you make the changes as you go through them. These are coached programs. They're not educational programs. So you have a mentor, or if you choose it, even a one-on-one practice coach to guide you through the journey. Here in the United States, we have one of the premier and largest accounting technology shows that we host called Scaling New Heights. And it is the only show in the United States that draws almost every single general ledger player under a single roof. The global general ledger players, Xero, Accounting Suite, Acumatica, Microsoft Business Central, and more, Sage Intacct, are all under a single roof at Scaling New Heights. And then we have, I guess, my favorite thing to talk about, if people can check it out for free at woodard.com. We produce a reality TV show that is cable television quality called Tech Makeover. And it's filmed in the reality TV format, but it's in a video case study. And it documents the transformation of a small business technologically by a small business advisor. It's got a production value of $125,000 per hour. So it's serious. And everybody listening to this can go watch it for free.
Joe, that's terrific. And just to finish then, top skills and attributes accountants, CPAs, bookkeepers are going to need over the next few years to compete and serve their clients optimally.
Yes, they're going to need to become coaches. Okay. And coaches is their primary profession. Record keeping and compliance is a means to an end, as the fuel for that fire. And if they will do that, Rob, then they will not only survive in the coming years, their practices will thrive in the coming years.
Joe Woodard, that's been world class. Thanks so much for your time and your passion today.
It is always great to be here, Rob.
You've been watching or listening to the Accounting Influencers podcast featuring hosts Rob Brown and Martin Bissett, with key interviews, what's working in the accounting profession, and news from the accounting and fintech world that helps you do your jobs better. We go out to 144 countries, over 20,000 unique listeners with 100,000 downloads, and it is accredited for continued professional education and development. Thank you for tuning in.